Let's begin here. The Rooibos industry in the country has paid out around 12.2 million rand to the Khoi and San communities. This as part of a benefit sharing agreement signed almost 3 years ago. This move is hoped to assist in reducing high levels of poverty, create food security, social development and biodiversity conservation. Flora Mokgohloa is with the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment and joins us live now. Flora, one of the things that, of course, we see with this particular partnership, it's not a new, agreement as we hear. It's a culmination of a partnership that we saw being signed in 2019. It's quite a significant development that we are now at this particular point as far as inclusivity goes.
Certainly it is, and we are just activating one of the objectives of our policy, which is around ensuring that all access and benefits are shared from the use of biodiversity and its component. You would know that in terms of our policy, we pursue 3 objectives. One, which is conservation. Second, which is sustainable use. And sharing access and benefits equitably is the 3rd objective of our policy. I also just need to mention that our policy has now been released for public consultation, and we're inviting the public to be providing us with comments, because one of the big issues around through these access and benefit sharing agreements that we are facilitating as a department to ensure that we actually transform the biodiversity and conservation sector. So this is quite a very historic agreement, which is a culmination of about 9 years of negotiations. Thank you.
And let's talk about the significance, of the Khoi and the San communities who are now sharing in these particular profits in the Rooibos industry, who benefit, of course, from their traditional knowledge of the tea and the commercial use of this plant.
As we know that the San and the Khoi are recognized as indigenous people and therefore do hold indigenous knowledge or local knowledge related to a use of natural resources such as the Rooibos. And therefore, in terms of our policy prerogatives to ensure that that knowledge regarding the use of this valuable, very unique South African product, it is recognized, and that in case that knowledge is commercialized, we play a facilitating role in protecting their indigenous knowledge in respect of this natural product.
And is this payment the only payment that will be made, or will it be made in tranches?
Okay, this is the first payment of about 12 million to 2 communities, and annually there will be about a 1.5% levy that will be paid by the industry into a trust account. The trust account is established through the department by the National Treasury, and we in effect are facilitating and ensuring that the industry in actual fact pay in those monies into the account and on an annual basis, and then we dispense the benefits accrued to the trust accounts of these 2 communities. I need to indicate that the Khoi community does have a trust set up already, and therefore they should be immediately be able to receive the amount of just over 6 million into the account. The San community is going to be, the trust is going to be established together with the Andristian Trust. So they're still setting up their governance mechanisms. And once the governance mechanism is in place, our role will be to ensure that the 6 million is then transferred into the account, and that the 1.5% levy is equitably shared between these 2 communities as and when it is paid into the trust account.
As with the case, when there's big monies and communities involved, and I mean, this is a project that is aimed, as the department said, and I remember in 2019 talking about, job creation and supporting small-scale farmers, and I think if I'm to be correct, it was around 160 of small-scale farmers, and also reducing the levels of poverty. How then will you ensure as the department that this money goes towards its intended use?
We've facilitated the actual agreement in line with the National Environmental Biodiversity Management Act. You will know that the setting up of governance structures will then follow from other legislative provisions that are administered by departments such as the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition. And therefore, in line with those governance mechanisms, we have looked at a suitable governance arrangements, such as establishing a trust where trustees will be appointed by these communities. Our role will be to work with these communities to ensure that they appoint the right people. We provide capacity to them, which is actually one of the initiatives that we are currently undertaking to ensure that we provide the communities with the necessary skills around management of trust, financial management, governance structures, marketing, etc., and ensure that the structure that is established is one that they are happy with and that will be able to run their affairs for their interests.
And I remember the minister in 2019 talking about this, and you've also touched on it at the beginning of this conversation. She said that, this would provide lessons that are needed to end the commercial and non-commercial exploitation of species associated with traditional knowledge held by other local communities who do not necessarily benefit from agreements such as the one that you were launching back in 2019. Fast forward to now, what would you say are some of the lessons that have come out of this particular agreement on how to do, similar agreements in future and which boxes you need to tick?
This is a landmark agreement due to the fact that it's a first of its type that we have facilitated as a department. And what lessons we have learned, I'm sure we can derive lessons learned from especially land reform programs. There are successful cases, there are cases where there's been challenges, but in this particular case being a product of a long negotiated program where we facilitated between the industry itself, the South African Rooibos industry, and the San community and the Khoi and the San community. Part of what we have learned is to ensure that we need to firstly capture the knowledge that they have in respect of the use of the natural resource, understand the community dynamics in terms of the social structures and how they relate to each other and relate to the natural product. And thirdly, to then assist them in respect of how do they commercialize this knowledge that they have and be able to negotiate the right agreement for them with the market out there, whether it's an industry association like the South African Rooibos industry or otherwise a private company that comes in. There are a number of agreements that we are also facilitating. These are involve very complex negotiated processes. As you can see, this one took almost 10 years to come to. Others that are easier to negotiate revolve around the use for research and commercial purposes also. But in this particular case where we're going to market, especially the products having an overseas market, it is very important that as government, we protect the rights of these communities, especially the Khoi and the San communities.
Is the department hoping that this, particular agreement will culminate into more such agreements, as you say, in the future? Because we've seen in various communities, even outside the scope of your work, for example, we're seeing in, the Department of Minerals and Energy, and you're looking at the fact that some of the communities wouldn't want, exploration to be done in their communities. Others say the mining rights should not be given to this particular community. So there's quite a lot that goes on when it comes to the work of communities and activists and government in this regard. Are you hoping this is going to spill over into various departments as well in order, as to say, protect the indigenous communities as well and address some of the concerns they're raising?
So this is a first for the sector, for the biodiversity sector. I need to indicate that. Let me give an example. During COVID, we had seen a lot of interest around using nature-based remedies such as umhlonyana or lengana. And I'm sure when people drive around, they can see some people trying to sell it around the street. We need to understand where does that knowledge regarding the use of plant-based remedies is retained and be able to then assist those communities that hold the knowledge, because the big thing is around ensuring that we protect the knowledge. As you know, that our history around our relationship with natural resources is not protected necessarily. And therefore, our role as government is to ensure that this indigenous local knowledge is protected in respect of the use of these natural resources. And we work with these communities that hold the knowledge to be able to to protect the knowledge, and where it is commercialized or it is used for research purposes, we facilitate the relationship with the market, so that we can develop a very vibrant biotrade sector, as we call it, in the use of natural resources.
And it goes very far towards inclusivity as well, and making the communities as part of the solution. So thank you so much, Flora, for your time. We do appreciate it, as she was taking us through this particular agreement, that really it started back in 2019. And if you remember, quite a lot of work has gone into this, and it has now culminated in the first payment of around 12.2 million rand to the Khoi and the San communities. And this is, of course, the Rooibos industry, paying into now their trust accounts. And this was an agreement that was to, of course, work towards alleviating these communities. And interestingly, these two communities, the Khoi and the San, are right at the forefront of this agreement, and they are taking part in this particular agreement. So certainly a groundbreaking one, as the department says that it is the first of its kind, and it's hoping then to continue and bring more on these. Let's then move on.